Hello and welcome to This Podcast Cannot Continue, a podcast about video games by two friends. This is episode 27, and we are heading into, well, we're already kind of firmly in fourth quarter of 2021. We're running to the end of the year.
Yeah. I guess so. This is like awards season, right? Because we just had we just had the golden joysticks, which I don't pay attention to.
Nope.
Steam is asking its users to nominate games for their awards.
Right.
That's an entirely user-driven award system.
Yeah.
Which means it can be a bit of a popularity contest, but it also means that you don't get those really weird left field, like why would they ever choose this, like you get in some of the award shows. Yes. I don't think awards are that meaningful because, again, when it is a popularity contest, it's always really obvious who the winner in a category is, but when it
seems a little arbitrary too, though.
When it's a judge panel, it's always like, why? Why that? Why? You know what I mean?
What do you think's going to win at the Game Awards, though?
So yeah, but the Game Awards is the interesting one because that's one that actually comes. That's basically like winter E3, right?
Yeah.
Okay, maybe not quite that extreme, but
sort of.
It comes with announcements and reveals and stuff. The Game Awards. Yeah, I actually filled out my votes for the Game Awards. Which,
I have not.
Doesn't mean much to me, just like what we were kind of saying earlier, but yeah, I can look at some of the nominees here and see. Like the Game of the Year nominees are Deathloop, It Takes Two, Metroid Dread, Psychonauts 2, Ratchet & Clank Rift Apart, and Resident Evil Village. If I can be honest with you, I have a feeling it's probably going to be Ratchet & Clank.
Really?
Maybe Metroid Dread, RE, or Deathloop has a chance.
Dread's
I'm sure that
good.
Psychonauts 2 and It Takes Two I'm sure they're fantastic games. I've heard that It Takes Two is like even better than A Way Out, apparently. But I just don't think that they have the kind of popular, like they just don't have the reach.
You don't have the Game of the Year vibe.
Yeah.
Deathloop seems like that's the AAA answer for this list. You know what I mean?
Really?
Well, no.
I
don't think it's going to win. I just think that like that is sort of the game of that type to show up here. You know?
Well, that's what I mean, though. That kind of thought is why I mentioned Ratchet & Clank first. That's one that I think has the highest chance.
But it's got a little more personality than Deathloop.
I have no idea how much Deathloop has personality-wise. It's really hard to tell.
Well, people still talking about Ratchet & Clank, but I haven't heard much about Deathloop. You know, it's only been 2 months since it came out, or a month and a bit.
I've seen some chatter on Twitter. But I don't. I've actually heard a lot of really positive things. The only negative things I've heard about are two things. One, that it still has void engine performance issues that are from Dishonored 2.
Okay.
And that it was like overexposed during like trailer season. But I've heard a lot of people say that the game is actually really fun. The game is really good. All kinds of stuff like that.
Right.
Personality wise, though, I see what you're saying. I have no idea. It's got that kind of like weird Art Deco like.
Here's what I think. It kind of feels like to me like a classic Oscar season movie. You know, it ticks all the right boxes, but is it really something that everybody's going to remember really strongly in like 10 years? Hard to say.
No idea.
But maybe Ratchet and Clank sort of hits this Pixar movie vibe where people probably will be talking about this game 10 years on.
I think a lot of people will talk about it repeatedly for a really long time as like kind of our first look at what like the SSDs and this gen could do. If like when they're talking about the history of the generation, I think it'll just constantly get brought up as like when we first saw the portals in Ratchet and Clank. Yeah, that'll be like the thing people say.
You know what though?
Do you think Metroid Dread do you think Metroid Dread is too niche? Do you think it kind of has a chance? Or
honestly, it might be too niche, but it's seriously so good. The the attention to detail, the animation, the gameplay. It's tight, and if you like Souls games and games that are a little punishing, it's starting to cross over into that, you know, because Metroidvanias, I think, kind of flirt with this idea. I know that people do intense runs of Hollow Knight and Castlevanias and whatnot. But this game, there's like a very robust parry system. Movement feels so good, like all of the time. It's so well crafted and put together. Does it have the best graphics of all these games? Definitely not. But it really, really is something special. I think does it deserve to be Game of the Year? That's a conversation maybe, but I think it's definitely Nintendo's strongest showing all year. Like
cool.
hands down. It's very, very good.
Do you think? I think I will be upset. Well, I mean, no, of course, because I don't take these that seriously. But like, I think it would be pathetic if something else won Best Score and Music over Nier Replicant, which is nominated.
Oh no, I think that game should win for that. Obviously, because I love that game's soundtrack to death. It's so good.
Yeah, I don't know. There's a couple of little things here. I think FF14 is nominated in 2 things. I know it's in Best Ongoing.
I think that's fair. That should be a lock for that, to be honest.
Yeah. I think that Best Role-Playing actually looks surprisingly competitive.
What's in there?
The kind of like bad picks here are like Cyberpunk, and then I also think Scarlet Nexus is kind of just
that
too
game
mid.
didn't come out in 2021.
Yeah, but because they cut off certain games at the end of the year, because there's like like if a game came out in December right now, it like doesn't count, right? So it goes into the next year.
I gotcha.
But like the 3 kind of like possible like bangers on this list are like Monster Hunter Rise, SMT5, and Tales of Arise.
Honestly, okay, here's my opinion on this. I have not played Monster Hunter, so everybody who has played that can probably disregard everything I have to say about it. I think that it's been a weird year for RPG games with stories, because Tales of Arise is a very good RPG, but I'm still finding it a little bit textbook. That's like my main problem with it. For all the good it does for the Tales series, and I think it does a lot of good for the Tales series, it's just, I don't think it's as deep or as emotional as I wanted it to be or hoped it would be, you know? And SMT5, from what I've played so far, it's an SMT game. It's the apocalypse. It's big metaphysical choices and thoughts, but
you're not going to get that like
but what
very
happened,
zoomed in emotional appeal story.
Yeah, what happens is kind of light. The subject matter is extremely heavy, but like what happens as you play the game is a little bit lighter, because it's more about the playing
Mood
of the
and
game,
the atmosphere, and the game itself. Yeah,
and I think as a game, it's very well made. It just does run into some performance issues, and some people have pointed that out. There's a couple of things about it. So, like, I would like to see it win over Tales of Arise, but I think as an all-around package, Tales of Arise might fire on more cylinders, if that's fair to say.
That's probably true.
I would be happy if either of them won, but I think Guts, under the hood, SMT5 is maybe the better RPG experience, but Tales of Arise is a very, very, very well-made game.
Not that I can pass judgment, as I've played very little of only one of the 3 games that I said I felt had a chance. Like, I haven't played Arise or SMT5 yet. I played only a bit of Monster Hunter Rise. But the only thing I'll say in Monster Hunter Rise's case is that I think Monster Hunter World has won multiple things at the Game Awards before. So I kind of have a personal belief that maybe the Game Awards judges have a little bit of like a pro Monster Hunter lean.
Sure. I mean, Monster Hunter's been on a tear for a couple of years here. Which
might give it a run. I think there's a lot of... I figured out the other FF14 is best community support, and if you ask me, it absolutely deserves that, hands down.
I think that's very fair.
Its competitors are like Apex Legends, Destiny 2, Fortnite, No Man's Sky. There's a couple other categories I think are kind of interesting, just to go through them really quickly, where I think there's like a really obvious winner. Like, most anticipated game, I think the really obvious winner is probably Elden Ring.
Yeah.
There's God of War Ragnarok, Horizon Forbidden West, The Legend of Breath of the Wild 2, maybe is
that
the
one.
other really obvious choice there. And Starfield, which is that like Bethesda space game. Yeah, okay.
I think Elden Ring's anticipation is so high because the network test was so successful. For a beta, I feel like they just got so much praise, and they seemed to be listening to what people had to say that were constructive criticisms. I really think they're tuning that game in a good way. I really think that they're setting themselves up for an easy win, and if they don't knock it out, I would be surprised. I think people will criticize the graphics, saying they look a little last gen, but I think overall that classic FromSoft, shine is there, and I believe that they can live up to the hype on this one. So I think Elden Ring, that was a make or break moment. If the open world Dark Souls didn't really sell everybody in the network tests and everything, yeah. Exactly. So I think that it's really ramping up. But Breath of the Wild 2, obviously,
it's kind of a big one. Like, I think a lot of people sort of are ready to forget about it because it's not as immediate. Like, forget about it as in, like, before they clicked on the category, they were probably like, oh, obviously Elden Ring. But I think maybe enough people will kind of pause and go, actually, for me, Breath of the Wild, and then like the votes could go that way.
Sure.
2 more categories I just want to mention because I got my eye on something. And I'm sort of, these ones, it's not so interesting to talk about maybe, but it's just, I got my eye on somebody I'd like to see win it. So like one of them is Best Sim or Strategy. Of course, have become a big fan of Age of Empires 4. I've played a lot of it since it came out. I really like it. And I think its competition is pretty light with like Humankind I don't really take seriously. Evil Genius 2, like I don't even know. I think the 2 competitive ones here are like Inscription, which like maybe, but it's also kind of an indie. Might not have just might not have the reach to like pull a lot of votes. Though real competition in this category is Microsoft Flight Simulator.
Right.
So they're kind of competing against themselves there a little bit. and then under Best Mobile Game, there's like literally just a bunch of junk and Genshin Impact. And I think that Genshin Impact is genuinely a really good game as long as you can like sort of temper yourself from like buying into its monetization model or like doing gameplay things that will make you like suffer that. Like basically as long as you like are willing to like not get things when they come up under the monetization model, like you can have a fantastic time with Genshin Impact. And I think they're telling a really cool story that's going to like keep running for years to come. And to me, it's sort of the obvious choice in this category, even though I've never even played it on mobile. Of course, I played on PS5, but to me, it seems like the obvious pick in that category. And then, the rest of the categories are like whatever. Like, I don't really know. I'm not that interested in like best esports event or things like that. Like,
Forza 5 should probably win for whatever category it's in.
Yeah, it's in a few categories. It's in innovation and accessibility, and it's in best audio design.
Yep. I think those are both very fair.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
It's in a few categories that probably has a shot in, to be honest, when I look at some of the options. So I think, best sports and racing, of course, as well. Yep. It seems like the obvious choice when I look at that category.
Very much so.
I'm sure it's... I'll bet you, I would actually bet money, maybe, that Forza Horizon 5 is coming away with 3 awards, having looked at the 3 categories it's in. I think that's probably very easy for them.
The ongoing debate will be for years whether or not it should have been considered best game of the year.
It's not a game of the year nomination.
I know. That's the problem that people have.
Oh, you think that? Oh, are people saying it should be one of the nominees for game of the year?
I think I haven't checked it today, but recently it was the highest rated game this year on Metacritic.
Huh.
Like by a couple points. So
that's actually super interesting.
Yeah.
All right. Well, anyway, we spent a few minutes on that. Do you want to move on to topics or any other thoughts?
I sure do. Let's go on to topics.
Okay.
So you're first this week. So hit me with it.
So I have a more narrow version of this topic to present first, but if there's not a lot to say, I have an idea of how we could broaden it. But to start, what I kind of want to talk about is like how to get good.
Oh man, I need to know because I'm not.
Me too, because I'm also not good.
You beat all the Souls games.
So I think that is a matter of persistence. And talking about maybe how I even made that happen might be a part of talking about getting good as well, right? And it's funny that you mentioned Souls particularly because I feel like Souls is the franchise where like literally just the phrase "get good" is, is like sort of the like that. That's like the meme, right?
Right. Yeah.
So
I was under the understanding that that's where it came from.
I mean, it's like 2 words. I'm sure they've been said before that plenty.
But like the whole
maybe it's meme status. Yeah.
Because the meme came from, wasn't it people asking on forums being all
like how do you
beat this boss and people were just responding with
I keep getting invaded.
Yeah, just get better. It's like, oh, okay.
Yeah, so it's like a little bit it's a little bit stupid, right? Like, no, maybe no offense to, like people that say it, but like you're leaving out a lot of the picture. So I guess you know what? Let's make this topic. If you've ever been told get good, let's explore how.
Well, so here's the thing. The weird part about that saying to me is that it seems very not helpful when you hear it, but the depth to that comment is sort of true. You will get good if you keep doing it.
Yeah, you kind of have to, and you probably will if you don't give up. So I think that like one of the things that I had a recent experience with, and this has to do with Final Fantasy XIV, which is maybe the one game that I am at least above average at. I'm not necessarily going to say I'm good, because the problem is, and this is actually sort of a thing that's been found legend. In like sports and in all kinds of different hobbies, games, whether they be video or otherwise, which is that the people who are like at the top of like, or people who are just high in skill in general, discover that like there's like those people that are so much better than them, and like to the average person the gap looks like infinitesimally small, but it's like not, right? Okay. Like it's kind of like, I think one of the places where I first like really got to like hear about this phenomenon but didn't understand it firsthand because I was always at the bottom is like Dota. And so I would hear about like players who were getting MMR, which is matchmaking rating. It's kind of like an ELO type system, who were getting MMR numbers where like the general community said like, if you're like 5K or 6K or something, you're like good. And there were like pros who would reach like 7K, 8K. And then there was some people that just went on these like tears where they would be up like 9, 10K, 11K. So you get these like pub stompers who basically just go play ranked online matches like over and over and over again. And they're just super good at the game and they grind out ranked matches. And people think like, oh, these like let's see what happens when this like 9K MMR player like joins a pro team, and then they are like a fish out of water in the actual pro circuit playing like at LAN tournaments, right? Right. Because there's like actually a huge difference between like the real like best players at the game and like the people who can climb a ranking ladder, right? Okay. And so like I feel like while FF14 maybe doesn't necessarily have a ladder other than like ranked parses, like I can clear T, have perfect legend, by the way, but like a great example of this maybe is like I played warrior when I cleared T and my best parse was 40th percentile, which means that like 60% of people who cleared T as warrior like did more damage than me in their clear. They optimized the fight even more. They literally did the fight better than me.
60%, right? 60% of the less than 1% of people who have cleared that content, though, you're still up there, right. Man.
Right. So, but I guess, so where I'm going with this is like, there's those people. And then even above them, there's people like Sphia who like world first did the fight on Black Mage.
Sure. Okay.
Right.
Yeah.
With his, so like, there's always like these echelons of players who are like super high up there. And so the sort of phenomenon I figured out is I joined like a several hundred member guild, free company recently. And what I've found is that people treat me like I'm, not like I'm maybe like Sphia, but they kind of treat everybody who is an ultimate raider like the same. And like I am not like people like Rin Karagani or like Llama Todd on Twitch who are not on Sphia's level, but they're way above me with like hundreds of ultimate clears because they just spend most of their time running that content over and over again and running viewers through it and stuff like that. And it's right. Like I wouldn't be able to touch them. And like, you see these clips of people doing like incredible things. And to me, it's like I can still have my mind blown by an FF14 clip where somebody does something I've never seen before because they're doing like the most nitpickiest, like top end stuff. And so I guess by getting to where I am, I realized that like I'm decent at the game, but there's still so much room for even somebody like me to grow. And so this is like a common phenomenon that I think a lot of people discover if they do like reach a certain skill level at something, is that like when you were a beginner, it all seemed the same above a certain point.
Right. Yeah.
But when you start to reach the bottom edge of that point, you discover that it's actually like also a pretty wide field. And like, yeah, it's a narrow percentile wise of like everybody that does that hobby or interest or plays your game or whatever it is. But in terms of like the differences, like FF14 is not a PvP game, but let's just say like hypothetically that all of these things we talked about, we were talking about like, I don't know, StarCraft or Counter-Strike or something. Like I probably wouldn't stand a chance in a match against these people if this was like a PvP game, right? Like they would like literally just by nature of the fact that it's PvE, the comparison doesn't really happen. But if this was like a PvP game, like you would like actually just see what it looks like when somebody that much better than somebody else gets wrecked, even though like they both seem like they're at the top when you're looking up from the bottom, right?
Yeah.
It's kind of interesting. But anyway, I had an experience where I was helping a newer player. And
is that newer
I guess
player
I'm
me?
just launching right. No, actually, it's just a person in this FC. But I got on like a Discord call and screen shared with him and talked about executing like a rotation in the interface. And I introduced to him the concept of when. So you've played Machinist. So anybody who hasn't played FF14, there's a phenomenon where a few of the jobs in the game you put up a certain type of buff. It gives you access to a button you can press, like an ability you can press, for a short amount of time. So it's a fixed number of times you can press that ability, usually within this window. So like a good example is Machinist. You press Hypercharge, you can press Heat Blast 5 times,
Correct.
right? You just have enough time to press it 5 times. And there's a countdown beside your meter, right? And so I think the thing that you do when you first start playing the class is you count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then you return back to the part of your rotation before you went into hypercharge. But what I've encouraged this player to do is to specifically do their rotation on the dummy and pay attention to what the countdown is at as they're pressing the buttons, right? Because if you learn that, you press hypercharge and it starts at 10 because it's 10 seconds, so immediately it drops to 9, the number on the counter, because it doesn't show the decimal, but it's obviously like 9.9 seconds after 0.1 seconds, right? So the first heat blast you're going to press, the counter says 9, and they're 1.5 seconds, right? So the next one you're going to press, actually, I think it starts at 8 and goes down from there. So it would have been 7 or whatever. So the first one you press says like 7, and the next one you press says like 5, and the next one you press says 3, and the next one you press says like, well, they're not perfect intervals because again, it's 1.5s, not 2s. But
sure.
The point is you memorize what number you expect to see when you're on your 4th heat blast every time. And then you don't have to count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. You can just press a few of them and look over. And then you see that counter says 3 when you're pressing one. I must be on the 4th one. I have time for one more, right? And so I don't have the numbers offhand, but I know them for my own class, Warrior, where we do the same thing. We press 5 foul cleaves under inner release. So I know what number on my inner release buff. Like I know if I see 5, I have like 2 more. If I see 3, I have 1 more after the one I'm pressing. If I see 1, I'm pressing my last one, right? And so this stops me from having to count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 or having to watch it. I can just be pressing it, and it's something I can just look at, like checking my rear view mirror and like kind of establish that, right? So I guess where I'm going with this is like
how I do that at all.
Right. So one of the things I'm advocating here when you're playing a game and you're trying to get good is like create a list of things that you check, like you're checking the rear view mirror of your car while you're driving, or you're checking your other mirrors or your blind spots, something that you're going to check periodically, right? And specifically, if you need to be able to determine like something, like for example, how many foul cleaves have I pressed, like you want to be able to determine it at a glance instead of having to count it out, you can go out of your way to learn what you will expect to see at that time.
Right.
So that way it becomes a rear view mirror check. You only have to look at it once and see the number and you know where you are. Right?
Okay.
And so versions of this exist in games other than FF14, right? I think that a good example of it is like Dota or real-time strategy games where I think it's really common for newer players to games like Dota and League of Legends and maybe RTSs to like pay attention to what their cursor is doing, their mouse cursor, what their character in Dota or League, or what the units they have selected in like StarCraft, Age of Empires, RTS games are doing, and spend too much time like not looking at the minimap. And you might have had a chance to spot something, be that like an enemy player as they briefly moved under your vision on the map or something like that. But if you're not checking it frequently enough, like you're not going to notice it, right? Or in an RTS like Age of Empires or StarCraft, like if your town center or your main building is producing your workers or villagers, You know what I mean? Like being able to like see the keyword, like the little like alerts that say like something was created or whatever is something that maybe you'll want to pay attention to if you're like trying to do a certain build order or like a certain worker assignment or something. I'm not that great at RTS games, so I don't necessarily know what all the rearview mirror checks are yet, but I know that part of getting good at this is going to be making a list of things, right?
I think that this is true for
certain types of games, competitive games so far.
Well, I was going to think games with resource management, because I'm going to liken this to playing an instrument.
Okay.
And to me, the rearview mirror checking would be, say, if you're on the guitar or piano, seeing your scales or chords or arpeggios or whatever you want to play being listed out there. And a lot of people do play like that, and that's a completely valid way of playing the guitar. But I think even people that do that on any instrument will also readily admit to having things they do without thinking about them, and they do not need to check their rearview mirror. And I think when you ascend to that level of playing, that's when you are truly embracing the get good, if you will. Because to me, that suggests that, so you're talking about, you look at this mountain and it seems like you'll never do it. So what you suggested is perfect for the first steps. I think, you make a list.
Yeah.
You make a list of what you have to keep track of, and then you learn how to minimize your time keeping track of that so you can focus on the playing so that it becomes more natural. I think the next step, though, is to maybe remove the rearview mirror checks when possible. Obviously, because games have resources and there are things that need to be managed, that's not possible completely all of the time, right? But because when I do
depends, right?
when I do my hypercharge, and I am not perfect at this, so I'm maybe not even the right person to say this, but I have it set on my F keys, and they're set in a group of 4. So it's almost like a guitar lick to me. Like I know that as soon as I hit hypercharge, I can do, I keep track of which of my weaves are available. That's the only thing I keep track of. And then I do the same action almost every time. I just alternate, and then I've gotten pretty good at guessing when I hit the final weave and go back into my rotation. It's just,
so you're sort of building it by muscle memory then.
Right, and
because when you say by guessing, the guess is not really guessing. It feels like I've done enough, which is a form of like building muscle memory.
Right, and I will admit I do quote rear view mirror check. I basically start the hypercharge, start into my thing, and then after I've done, I don't know, in my mind 3 or 4, if I'm not really counting that closely, I check. If it says 1, I just hit whatever weave I'm on and I go back into it, because I'm assuming that I've hit probably 5 heat blasts.
Okay.
Now, this is not perfect because I am not a perfect player of this class. I will fully admit I'm quite casual. So I know that probably 80% of not 80% of the time, probably 80% of the time I'm hitting all 5, and probably there's 20% of the time I'm hitting 4, to be completely honest. But I don't know. Oh, well, maybe it's just for the level that I'm playing it. If you're playing extreme stuff, I think you would have to fine tune that so that your rearview mirror checks get more specific, as you were saying. But I think for the casual level of playing and whatnot, but I think also in other situations you could get to the point where you would remove that check, or you could get pretty close to removing that check and do it off of feel rather than
that one in particular. I think you can get to a muscle memory point with it for sure.
Right, and
there's definitely a point. Like I've definitely done it. I don't do it every time yet.
Right.
Perhaps I'm getting there.
Right. And I think that
but a lot of the time I feel compelled to check.
Yeah. I think a lot of games rely on that. Like if you're talking about getting good at a fighting game with less resource management, but more reaction and opponent management in a way, at first I think you have to treat it almost like learn the basics, learn your character. But then it's responding to specific scenarios that you're in with the other person that you're playing against, right? Like, oh, they're jumping, I'm going to anti-air, or here comes the grab, I'm going to get out of this, or I'm going to go low. And like there's things like that. But the highest level players understand what's happening at a level that you cannot think. They're not thinking like that. They're almost probably playing as though it's an extension of their actual reactions, you know? And this is kind of the distinction that I make when it comes to, as I said before, just instruments, just because it's a thing that I understand in a way for this topic. It makes sense to me. There are things that I play on the guitar that I do not think about at all. And when I have to think about them to, fix little pieces of them or
maybe even makes it more difficult.
Or switch them up, it almost makes it more difficult because I've gotten so used to, and it's not that I don't know what's going on, it's just that what's going on isn't important while I'm playing it. But there are other things, when I'm incorporating new things into my playing, that I am consciously going out of my way to include. And even if it sounds good to somebody listening or sounds natural or whatever, the difference is that I had to do an extra step to make that happen because it hasn't entered into the realm of being a natural extension of my playing. Exactly. And I think when it comes to Souls games, people who are at the level who could just say, oh, you just have to get good, they know how these games feel to play them, and they know what the dodge feels like. They know what a heavy attack with this weapon feels like. They know where that enemy's hitbox is because they fought this boss so many times, And that enters into this thing where now they're no longer going, they're doing this, so I'm going to do this, or they're doing this, so I'm going to do this. And they kind of are just looking, going like, dodge left, there's an opening. Back up. Hit there, back up. Estus Flask. You know what I mean? It's very automatic is the best way I can describe it. And I think that's the difference between this upper echelon player that you were saying that perhaps you don't feel like you're at yet. So you can perform at an extremely high level because you are very skilled at this game. But the difference between you, and correct me if I'm wrong here, you and these people that you're saying are even above you is probably that part,
It might be.
It might
be.
It's just, I think it's so ingrained.
I think that version of events isn't necessarily always applicable, and so the one maybe argument sort of against that, or not argument against it, but place where I would say that doesn't apply in FF14, it's a little bit trickier to point out something so specific, but I think a really obvious example is in the RTS and in the MOBA example. I don't think there can come a point where you can reduce or eliminate minimap checks, right?
No,
because that's information that you literally need to know what your opponent's doing, right?
I guess, but in this case, here's what I mean though. In this case,
I was doing one, so the purpose of the one that I was suggesting in something like FF14, it's actually a bit different of a purpose. It was like attention management, right? Or the division of your attention. Right. And so of course, if you can turn it into muscle memory and into something automatic, like I'm sure that the people who are above me have done, then yes, there's even more gains to be made. So I think that's sort of what you're really targeting, right?
Well, what I'm talking about when you talk about minimap, of course, if you're playing a game like that, you have to look at the minimap. And if you're playing FF and you have all these meters going, you have to check them. But I think my thing is, so if I'm playing rotation, and I can say this because I do this because I'm not that good at this game, when I'm playing it, what happens in my mind to check what's happening while I'm in hypercharge is I start it up and then I go, I'm focusing on my rotation. That can be muscle memory, or I'm focusing on it, whatever. And then I also have the thought, I should check where my meter's at. And then I check where the meter's at. And then I make a decision of what to do next. And then I go back into the thing. And the same thing with the mini map. You're playing an RTS and you go, I need to check. You're not just going down a list of actions and doing them automatically, which are your rearview mirror checks. You're giving yourself a rearview mirror check to rearview mirror check, and I think that's the step. I think that's the step that you're removing. So it's not, I need to look at the mini map.
It's the thought that you have something to do that happens before you do it that you are talking about eliminating.
Yeah, because if you're just doing it, it's just you're basically just absorbing all information that the game can give you, and you're doing it in a very organic way while responding to everything that's happening, and that's where you want to be.
I would say I'm not spending a whole lot of time when I play thinking about what I need to look at next. Not so much. No.
Then I would say that you're probably a lot closer to being on that upper echelon than you think you are.
It might be, but I still think there's things in between. I definitely think there's a lot of like muscle memory and stuff. I think one of the big things with me in particular is that would make me improve is if I did the same fights a lot more often.
Right.
So like, for example, in this past raid tier, the fight I did the most was E10S. I only did it 19 times, or at least I only have 19 logged kills, right? Or like T, I only cleared T 5 times.
Right.
The Epic of Alexander.
Well, yeah, because if
So,
you do
like,
it 5 times
you know
versus
what I
20
mean.
times, the person who did it 20 times will probably parse better than you
just
every time.
can't. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And so that's the thing, right? I've really got to like, if I invest more time into each specific fight, I can do them a lot better. And what I started to notice because of how long it took me to clear E12S was that in phase 1, I was getting to a point where not only could I simultaneously do the fight, but I could also call it out on voice to my team.
Yep.
And, excuse me, a hiccup for a second there. And I could actually spare some attention and literally like spend time watching my like teammates move for mechanics. So not only could I call a mechanic, but I could also like sanity check where everyone went, right? So I could say like, oh, you know, like whatever, like first, what am I talking about? Like, let's say, okay, this is like lions or whatever, right? Like first baits or whatever, right? And I could see just by looking at the arena, because I have the attention to spare on that, because I don't have to like look at my bars as much. I know where we are in the fight. I know what's next. Everything like that. I could literally call on the mic, looks good, or like that's good, that's correct, or whatever. And I could see, because I could see every person is in the right spot. Yeah, and like that is one of the things that I noticed myself, like must be a signifier that I'm doing more of the other things automatically. Because I have like the attention to spare, right?
Completely. That's exactly what it is.
Yeah. One of the things that you mentioned that I really wanted to jump on. Oh dear, where was it? You were talking about. You were talking about when you were like working in a new thing, and so this is something I want to talk about too a little bit, because this one I think is applicable to more genres. But again, I'm going to use the MMO and maybe the RTS and MOBAs as an example, because these are the games I'm using these examples because I think these are the games that I tried the hardest to get good at.
Okay.
And so when you're like working on like a new thing, or you've learned about a new like mechanic that you should be working on or whatever, I think it's nice to take like a match or like a sitting or session, or even just an attempt, like let's say if it's a pull in like a MMO raid, or even if it's a boss attempt in Dark Souls or whatever, focus on just doing that one thing right every time it comes around.
Dude.
Even if like everything else is like falling apart, right? Because if you're trying to do literally everything,
yeah,
it might be too much. But like if you're playing Dota and you're playing a hero that builds like they're called the treads, and you can change which stat the tread is, and sometimes that can be used to give yourself more health or more damage at the right times. Like you could play an entire Dota match focusing exclusively on tread switching as like the one thing you're gonna do, right? Or like, you know, I'm gonna play this Age of Empires map game, and like this isn't really as much of a thing in 4. Actually, I think you could still do this in 4. Whatever. It's more of a thing in 2 because you can split formation into 2 separate groups. But like you could say like, I'm going to play an entire match of AoE 2, and like win or lose, whatever falls by the wayside, every single time my enemy shoots a mangonel at my army, I'm going to split so that I dodge the projectile, right?
This is, by the way,
you have the music analogy?
Well, no, this is, so I am not the best musician in the world, obviously. I will freely admit to that, just to qualify this statement. But this is, I spend a lot of time on like the philosophy of practicing, because I don't know why, I just find it really interesting. And what you're talking about is literally exactly how you should practice something and how they recommend you practice something. You know, this
is what I've been thinking about.
They go, oh, you're trying to play with this new scale, or you're trying to incorporate this new technique into your playing. Record yourself, make a backing track, find a backing track of vamping a chord or vamping a progression that allows you to highlight the thing you want to work on, and then do that until you want to tear your own ears off your head. And then go do that with other people, but do it a lot less, because you've done it so many times now in a specific example that you know what is too much and you know what is too little, because you've played with all of the in-betweens on your own, and you'll have a more intrinsic understanding of when to do it. Now, an important part of this that I think is very interesting for games is that with music, you can listen to how other people improvise or write or play to get clues as to when would be appropriate to do these things, and also how they work and phrasing and rhythm and all these other things. You can watch other people play, and I think that does make people better in some situations. For example, I know that a big part of you preparing for tea was researching, right? You were practicing.
Yeah, a great example is when we started getting to the third phase, I noticed that my burst phase was not aligning with the boss's uptime moments, like where the boss is available to be hit. And what I ended up doing to solve this is I went to FF logs and I took one of the top warrior parses and I actually put it in a tool called like XIV analysis. I guess it would be 14 analysis, but if you're going to look it up, if you're listening, it's XIV analysis.
Right.
.com, and I put it into that tool, and that tool has a log at the very bottom of everything. It tells you that's a timeline, so it's all of the buttons you press literally in one big timeline. And I looked at that in order to see what the better player did, and I noticed he did a different opener, and all I actually had to do was change my opener to match, and everything lined up again. So
Dude, that's like lifting riffs off your favorite guitar player. That's
and then I
what
watched
you did.
a lot of footage. I watched a lot of footage as well because there's timing things in that fight that I learned.
I find this conversation so funny because
but it's like lifting riffs. Yeah, that's a good point.
What you're hitting on here is something that. Now, I don't do this with all games because my goal with a lot of games that I play is not to get good. I want to finish them. I want to play them, but I play a lot of games where getting good isn't really super important. Like RPGs, you can sort of over level, but that's not my point.
That was actually really briefly one of the ideas I had for expanding the concept. If we didn't have enough to say about it, is like, is it worth getting good, or like when is it worth getting good? Does it matter to you or whatever? But anyway, we can kind of leave that behind. Not every game requires it though.
And I was going to say, I think with music, it's to get whatever you want to get out of the experience, right? So if you're happy playing casual MMO content, you don't need to get this good, but there's probably a level of proficiency that you want to get so that you're not a burden to the team you're playing with or to the party you're playing with, right?
I guess there's like a lot of bedroom guitarists who kind of fit in the same category, right? They're not out to start a band. They're not out to play shows or write songs.
No, they just want to play the hits, man.
They want to play along to the songs they like with their headphones on and their amp in front of them. And
some people,
I think that's completely valid.
And some people pursue things just to see how good they can get. That's personally my goal.
Right. And I sometimes no goal in mind. You just
and
want to see where your limit is.
There's people who are my age who are extremely, much more talented at this than I am. But I know that for me, given the amount of time that I put into it, I want to see how much I can get out of it. So that's one of the things that motivates me to keep playing. And that's not everybody's motivation, but that is my motivation with it. So, what I find funny about this conversation is it just seems so obvious to me that this is how you would get better at something, because I honestly do believe, from looking at how to practice, and when you look at how to teach yourself how to do something, for example, getting better at an instrument or whatever, I think you do find that these skill sets are infinitely applicable to any situation where you would have to teach yourself how to do something. Like if you want to even move it to language acquisition, if you want to talk about something that has to become natural, it's the same things. You take idioms and phrases and colloquialisms from listening to other people who are natural language speakers speak it. You go to situations like, say, a class or an immersion situation where you learn a new phrase and you say it all of the time to the point of, overdoing it, because you have to learn where it's appropriate and where it's not appropriate, right? And these are all parts of it. If you want to even do a microcosm of this, say you're learning how to play a boss. I was playing a boss the other day in Metroid Dread. I'm not going to spoilers it, but I died like 1,000,000 times. And at first, I literally was like, I'm going to turn this off and go to bed because this is not happening tonight. But I stuck with it, and it took me like 45 minutes. But what happened was I broke it down into sections. I went, how can I get through the first part? I basically progged it. I went, how can I get through the first part? And I learned that. And I went, okay. And then the first part wasn't a problem anymore. And now the problem became, how do I get through the second part? What are the tells? What are this? And I tried a bunch of different things. I went, well, what if I do this every time? Can I just blast it with missiles? Will that work? Fun fact, it did not. So then I learned that there is a time to use missiles, but it wasn't all the time, because it sometimes blocks that from working. And then, so you know what I mean? This is just, it's funny. It almost feels redundant at this case because I feel like we've touched upon something that's silly because when we started this, I said it's funny that get good seems so dismissive, but really, it
do all of these things just without giving the person any instruction that they can.
Right, because
these things are.
I think weirdly enough, if you give anybody enough time with something, they'll sort out these steps on their own. However, I do think for some people, breaking it down into this process makes sense. You know, you get the general idea, you do your research, then you break it into chunks, then you figure out how to do each bit appropriately, and then you test the limits of each bit, what you can get away with on either end, whether it be doing the least or doing the most, right? And you find out where the middle ground is and you settle on it. And as these things start to settle out, you'll start to find that the easier things, because you've done them so much now, have become automatic. And now it's only the tough things that you have to think about. And then some of the tough things become automatic. And then it's only the new things that aren't automatic, you know? And then that's how you acquire pretty much anything. I feel like we just stumbled upon how to learn things as well.
But that's arguably what the topic is, isn't it?
Right.
I think the reason why I've wanted to talk about this is because I've been thinking about it so much since I'm going to be leading a static out of a large FC, a free company, guild, what have you. And so I'll be leading a group and I'm taking on newcomers. And one of the things that I said I want to do is make sure that I can give everyone as much like tools and like kind of philosophy and coaching as I can to make sure that people succeed instead of anyone feeling like they're falling behind or becoming dropped or anything like that, right? And so I've been thinking about it a lot. It's been on my mind, and I've just been kind of excited to talk about this topic.
Man, I love talking about practicing. It didn't click until a little bit into it that this is exactly like learning the guitar, but now that it is, I love talking about it. I do have a thing I wanted to say though.
Yeah.
Is it fair to say that get good only applies to games that are fair? Because think about this. Final Fantasy 14 is fair. It's hard and very difficult, but you can learn it. And when you do learn it, you can because there's so many instant death situations, you have to do some mechanics correctly or you will lose. And in the same way, Dark Souls is similar. There's a lot of fights that start out seemingly, impossible, but they become automatic after you do them over and over and over again. For you get to know the tells, you get to know all of the mechanics, and then people go, no hit runs. So it's possible, but I think there are games that either by design or by glitch or whatever are not fair. So telling people to get good at a certain game that, like for example, like you just get hit at this one part or something like that, that's not a fair thing to say in those situations. There seem to be games that are geared towards being a moderately level playing field if everybody puts in the same amount of effort. Fighting games, for the most part, I know that that certain characters are sometimes better than others and balancing is an issue, but fighting games, Souls games, online MMOs, racing games, I think sports games too. These are a lot of situations where you could
your esports genres as well.
You could Halo, whatever. You could just tell somebody you just need to get better, and they, in theory, could get better. But there are definitely games out there where you can tell someone to get better all they want, and it's just a broken game, right? Like that does happen. So do you think that to get good, something has to be fair?
Not necessarily. No, actually, no, I don't think so. I think you can still get good even if the thing is unfair. It just doesn't mean that you're going to win.
Okay, right? That's interesting.
So, like, I guess that's the simplest way to put it. But maybe to expand on that a little bit is like you can how do I say it? Like in a weird sort of way. Okay, this is gonna sound a little strange because it's not at all what you're talking about. Okay, so before you kind of like course correct me, I am going somewhere with this, right?
Could feel me gearing up, could you?
So so let's consider this, right? Like you always lose Tetris.
Me? Oh
no, like.
I was going to be like, you're pretty good at Tetris Attack, but I don't think I always lose, but I do always lose.
Sorry, I mean single player Tetris. Like you always like lose against the game,
but
right?
You can get better.
Yeah, it's what you're doing is you're like forestalling that loss, but eventually you can get better, right?
Sure.
So like if a game is unfair, now I think that it's kind of interesting because I wouldn't say Tetris is unfair just because you always lose. It's more like the objective of the game isn't to win. The objective of the game is like to survive.
Correct. Well, that's
right.
And
I guess essentially it becomes a score system, right?
I think Tetris is fair. Tetris is fair.
Well, that's what I said. Yeah, that's what I said. So it's like I'm saying it's not reasonable to call it unfair just because you can't win, right? So then the thing though is if you like take this idea of like, so what's like an unfair game? Like maybe like a fighting game and there's like a character that is so unbalanced that like it's always going to be like a 70-30 matchup, right?
Or like, I don't know, SNK fighting games like the King of Fighters and Fatal Fury and stuff like that had a lot of final bosses that were like, you could beat them, but they were obviously quarter eaters or whatever.
Not playing, on a similar playing field to you. Yeah. So this is the thing, right? Like if there's like a 70-30 chance against this one character, I was going to say like in the case of fighting games, maybe fighting games in multiplayer are only as difficult as your opponent is good. But even that's still not really like a worthwhile statement if your opponent is as good as you and then they play like the way better character. But also, you make a good point. Like the arcade hard like bosses is more designed to eat quarters and be a fair challenge. But like if it is like beatable like programmatically, right? Like let's say it's not like a situation where like it's literally a technical impossibility perhaps, right? Like there's like a defined unavoidable, or there's like the amount of time that you have to do the fight and the amount of like damage you can do per hit and the amount of frames it takes to do a hit and the amount of health the enemy boss, it's like mathematically impossible to do enough damage to kill him before it times out. Whatever. Like you could make that kind of unfair. If it's that kind of unfair, obviously I'm going to say no, because like you really just can't win unless there's like a different metric of winning, i.e. Tetris with survive and score, right?
Well,
so then in that case, maybe no. But if it's like doable and it's just unreasonable, I think that you can get better because it's doable.
But there's some games that have situations where, say, you just need to use healing items all the time because there's not a way to not be hit by things. To me, that's not fair. Is it doable? Yes. Is it hard? Yes. But that relies on your enemy having things that are inescapable, which is sometimes a fun way to make a fight. A little bit more spicy.
This sounds like JRPG Super Boss.
Sometimes, yeah.
Kind of idea.
Well, because so one of the loading screen signs in Metroid Dread says all attacks are avoidable. You just have to figure it out. Like it literally, like the loading screen basically tells you to get good. If you die to a boss a lot, it does tell you that, because something that I find very interesting about Metroid games, even going back to Super Metroid, is that they make it really hard for you to soft lock yourself. They always want you to be able to get out of whatever situation you're in. I know that people who have played Super Metroid sometimes get stuck really early in that jungly level. I don't remember what it's called. You can get out of that. So, yeah, it's not a dead end, I promise. And people know what I'm talking about, I bet you. But outside of that, it's nice that Dread kind of says that, because they've designed the game around these very tight, hard encounters, but when you get one right, it's like beating a Souls boss. You feel like you figured it out, and then you executed upon your plan, and then you did it perfectly, or by the skin of your teeth, but you still, overcame. And that's a really cool feeling, and it's built into the game design that all enemy attacks are avoidable or you can parry them. And that's on purpose, but a lot of games don't do that. It's kind of like, oh, you got hit. We expect you to press pause and then take a healing herb. And to me, that's not fun.
That this is kind of weird, because I think that like the issue with those examples is like the game isn't really going out of its way to test for skill if it's doing that, is it?
Right.
Like,
but then
maybe
if
there's not a point to get good, but I still think there's like
if there's hard if there's hard encounters in a game like that though, and then someone says, well, you just have to get better at the game. It's like, no,
it's weird.
I need more healing items. I don't have to get better at the game. I've already hit the I get it point of the boss fight, and now I'm into the I don't have enough consumables part, which doesn't feel like a test of skill. That feels like a test of preparedness.
So essentially the skill ceiling is like too low, right?
Sure.
Like if it becomes obvious what the right thing to do always is, and it's not really like an execution test, it's a preparedness test. It's like the skill ceiling is low, and so just be prepared. Yeah. So get good would be you're right. Okay, I get that now. So get good is a weird thing to say then. Yeah.
It's like
it is a weird thing to say in that situation.
It's like when games have hard modes, or even like nightmare modes or whatever, and the only thing that and the game is literally exactly the same. The only thing that's different is all of the enemies now have double health and hit twice as hard. It's to me.
I think that can be a test of skill, though.
It can be sometimes, but sometimes it just feels really like well now
like,
what?
If you die in one hit in like a shmup that fills the screen with bullets, there's still players who like
Can do
compete
that.
on
I know.
scoreboards for those games, right?
No,
so
I
there's
know.
obviously like I guess what I'm saying is like even if it's like insurmountably hard, I still think you can get good at it. I think it has to be like not a matter of skill for it to be something that you can't say get good at, right? Where it's like you never could have learned this strategy or that you needed to strategize in a way until you got to this point. So there was no amount of like getting good. Now it's just like learn the strategy. And you could argue that like how long it takes you to figure that out or whether you went online
Right.
to ask about it and got told get good instead of getting told the strategy, right? But if it's like, you know what I mean? Like if it's like that and not like asking you to execute or like outplay or something like that, then is it really getting good anymore, or is it
Right.
just be more prepared or like learn that this is the only option? Like if also that too, like if there's like only one option, it's kind of like, is that like getting good, or is that like just having to try all the options until you tried the right one? Like is that just trial and error? Right. So yeah, there's like definitely permutations of like gameplay situations where get good is not a reasonable thing to say.
Yeah,
I agree. Yeah.
I like this topic.
Sometimes it's not really testing skill.
Yeah,
Is I guess what I'll say.
that's fair too.
But I think like unreasonably hard. Like okay, they doubled the damage, they doubled what you take, they halved what you do. Like I still think that can be a test of skill, even
Sure.
if it's like
Sometimes.
not really like a reasonable. Yeah, like I think that the game's difficulty can be unreasonable, but it can still be testing skill. It's just not really reasonable, right?
Yes.
Like it's kind of weird to say that maybe, but.
No, I understand. I understand what you're getting at there.
Like what I think of when you say something like that is maybe like the very last like difficulty mode of Automata, where it's like you just die in one hit. It's like, why would you want to play that? I don't know.
Well, but that game offers you cancel out dodges out of literally everything, so you could feasibly do that.
Yeah, exactly. And
But
so
some
even
games-
if I think it's
but when
even if
you're-
I think it's an unreasonable difficulty, I think that it technically is like, so to speak, it's fair, especially because you agree to put it in that mode by the fact that it's a selection and then
Right.
like
But
it
there's-
can be done.
There's
right?
third-person action games though that are just cover shooters where they just double health and double damage and half what you do and make you take more, and those don't feel because they don't have an instant dodge. They don't offer a mechanical solution to not getting hit. So some parts just turn into you beating your head against the wall until you somehow don't get killed. That's not fun.
Yeah, it might be. It depends. I guess my only question to that would be like, do speedrunners do that mode glitchless? And if they do, then like there probably is like a get good there that's just like difficult as hell and people still do it. Like I don't know, you know what I mean? Like I guess I'm just saying that like when you describe these situations, I can envision like that there could be people who can do it and people who can't, and that it might not
I
just
think
be
you can see
knowledge,
that,
right?
but people have proven time and
like
time again that they'll
luck.
play broken games just to prove that they can do things. I think whether or not someone can do it is not a good condition for whether or not get good applies. Telling someone to get good at like nightmare mode
I don't
on
mean, like,
Uncharted
it's
2
possible.
isn't really fair because that game is just full of cheap deaths all the time. It's like you could get good at it, sure, and it would be interesting to see someone do a whole run of that, but like I would very much argue that playing that game on one hit kill is not fun in any way.
Okay, but this is kind of weird, right? So I think this might be a little spicy. I don't think you'll agree, but like the objective of the game is to win. The purpose of the game may be to have fun, at least if that's why you bought it, right? So like the objective of the game is something that the game defines, so the game developers define, right? It's essentially a win condition, right? And then like the purpose is to have fun. So like unfortunately this kind of goes back to like the game doesn't have to be fun,
But
like it
no,
probably
you're missing,
should be.
You're
if
missing
you bought
the point though. Getting good feels good
So-
if it's fair. You can get good at things that are.
it doesn't have to feel good.
I
I didn't think you were asking that.
You can.
Sorry.
You can get
Go ahead.
good at things that are hilariously unfair to the player. You can.
I didn't think that that's what you're asking though. I didn't think it had to feel good.
the reason
When we
why
were having this
the reason why I
conversation.
think
thought it could feel like garbage and still be valid as like get good.
no, well, because I think when people say if someone's having a game and they're playing it and they can't get past something and the response is get good. For example, in Dark Souls, that's probably fair. In a fighting game, that's probably fair. There's these situations where, because that saying, as we talked about before, encompasses you need to practice more so that this makes sense to you. But some of these games, even if you practice, it doesn't end up ever really making sense. Whether or not someone can do it is not the question. The question is the game fair about it?
That's not, I never meant, I didn't explain myself probably. I never meant that like, okay, it is humanly possible. I meant like, it is possible, but like, not someone can do it, because that's boring. Like, someone can do it and like will do it every time, or like, and maybe most people can't do it, right? Like, there's like a difference between like someone can do it, not everyone can do it unless they put in the same amount of time as the aforementioned someone, and like the someone who can do it isn't like reloading their game looking for the right RNG. Like, they can like produce it.
What I want to say is
in my mind, like,
is it reasonable? Yes. Is it reasonable to expect anyone could overcome this obstacle if they put in a bit of time to learn what's going on? And I think that Souls games are good for that. On the surface, they seem very difficult, and you do got to put in time into them and be persistent. But lots of people play them, and lots of people beat them. It's not like those games have a 0% clear rating, right? But I think
of course.
I think some games' extreme modes do have really, really low things, because getting good at them requires you to get good at something that is not fair. And that's the allure to some people. I get that. That's the allure to some people. But in those situations,
I just don't know why you're saying that means you can't say get good. Like, you can still say get good. It's just not going to be fun or worth it.
No, I just don't think. I don't think in that situation it's helpful, because, for example, if you just play Souls by just banging your head against the wall on it, you will probably one day beat that game. You probably will, because you'll figure it out, right? But there's a lot of games whose hard modes I don't think you would figure out unless, like, I don't think the average bear would figure it out unless you really dive the forums and really learn what's going on, because the stakes are too high or the margins are too narrow. It's not like baked into the game design that the game will teach you how to beat it by you just never giving up. It becomes but that doesn't mean that you're not still getting good if you like actually rise to that challenge and like study the crap out of the game and learn. No, you are. I think you're missing the point. You are, but those games I don't think teach you to do that. The game's not built. The game's not built around the hard mode being something that makes you a better player. The hard mode is just a challenge that you just have to figure out on your own. Whereas these other games are structured in a way where by playing them, you will become better at them, because that's how they've been designed. They've been designed like a little.
I guess I just don't agree. I guess I just like don't agree that the game has to like present you like the steps to getting good itself.
But I
don't think that has to be internal to the game.
It doesn't present you the steps to getting good. It's the design is so good that getting good will happen by playing it.
Yeah, I know, but I'm saying like I don't think that like that has to. I don't think that that's a requirement for like the concept that you can get good at it, and then therefore you could tell someone that if they were to like get good at it, that like, you know what I mean? Like, it's maybe not a reasonable thing to say to somebody about that kind of game. Like, it becomes more mean-spirited, like, and not helpful, right? Because if there's like fewer paths to victory that involve playing the game and more that involve like going out of your way to study external things to the game that other people have done, like, I guess my argument is like those external things don't usually come out of nowhere. Like, they still come from people making observations about the game, right? And like maybe ultimately they have to like sometimes data mine or backwards like reverse engineer the game and like figure out things that like they were maybe never apparent just by pressing buttons or playing the game.
Yeah,
maybe
but that's not,
you know, but like
what the average person would do. That's not to me good game design, because that game is not teaching you how to overcome that.
I don't think that like I'm trying to figure out what your original question was, where I started saying no to everything you're saying.
I was saying you can only get good in the way where it's kind of like go back to the woodshed and just play more. That only applies, and I'm talking like
I'm talking the methods we discussed only apply. Okay, fine, that's fine. Okay, yes, that I agree to. I thought you were saying, is it worth getting good at a game if whatever? No. And I was trying to argue like that's for you to decide. I thought you were trying 100%.
To say no, fair enough.
Like, is it reasonable to say get good to somebody? And I was trying to say, well, like technically, if you can get good, even if it's not these methods, like, yes. So I was getting really confused because I didn't really know what your premise was anymore. It was so far gone. But
that's
okay.
Fair.
Yeah, I'll agree that if like just sitting down and continuing to play the game isn't really going to get you there, then it's not. Then it's not these types of like learning methods or like traditional learning methods that'll get you there. Like, for example, yeah, like if you're like those people that are gonna like play like a ridiculously hard version of the game and you figure out like that this like one thing you do is like the way to do it, and it's like not apparent through normal gameplay. You have to like either like trial and error like every single like button possibility in like a TAS and then like reproduce that sequence on the controller with your hands. It's like that's not the same thing as like getting good, right? I mean, I would argue that these are like different methods to like get good, but they're not like the process of learning. They're like the game is like a puzzle box at that point.
Yes,
that you're like looking for a solution to.
You're now
I think that
dissecting a challenge as opposed to actually just practicing something in a natural way you would learn something.
Yeah, you don't learn a skill that is going to be like applicable to like a lot of different other parts or whatever of the game. You're like learning how to like. That's it. You're learning like the answer to a question.
Yes,
kind of.
You've nailed it.
I still think that that's kind of like a form of getting good, but it's not the same thing as developing a skill.
It is, but getting good in this case I'm talking about is like general. And then there's getting good at a specific run or a specific set of things. And here's the fun part. You will weirdly get good at the general skill of dissecting probably very difficult to dissect encounters in video games. If you want to go that super hard route, that's a different skill set that you'll evolve. But I still do not think that games with that kind of design do a very good job at teaching you how to get better at them.
No,
but I think some games do a really good job of doing that. Anyways.
Yeah. So I guess the very last thing maybe that I want to throw in there is on a bit of a tangent or like away from the tangent, but still on the topic is like, use your tools, right? Like depends on the kind of game you play. Again, maybe this doesn't really exist for like Dark Souls or like a single player immersive story game. So like with those, again, your practice methods are like the way to go, and you're like poking at the encounter and stuff.
A tool is YouTube watching encounters. A tool is going on a Discord talking to other players. There's tools.
Sure, but I mean like the really specific stuff. Like learn,
right?
Like you can learn how to use like analytical tools, right? So like if you play FF14, you have FF logs and you have XIV analysis. Like if you play like World of Warcraft, I know this very same website runs warcraftlogs.com. You can use that as well, and you can like analyze any little tidbit of information. If you can actually like learn how to turn that information into something meaningful that you can use to like make a change, or like for example, if we said like I kind of made the comment like focus on one thing that you're working on and like do a pull on the boss or like a run where you only focus on that one thing. Yep. Like XIV analysis is going to be the way, for example, for you when you said like maybe some heat, some hypercharges, you might not get all 5 heat blasts. Like XIV analysis is going to be the page where you put your last pull in and it's going to tell you like almost all of your windows you did get 5, but on this one you got 3. And then you're going to be like, uh-oh, what happened? And it's like, well, the boss jumped off the arena and you started it without knowing that was coming. So learn the timeline better so that you don't press it there, you hold it instead because you won't finish it, or like whatever, right? Whatever the solution may be. And then that isn't just MMOs, although MMOs have their logging in that. I don't know the one. I mentioned Warcraft logs. I don't know the one, but I know there's also a website for that game where you get a similar result as XIV analysis where it like tells you kind of what you did wrong and could change.
Sure. A similar program exists.
If you play Dota, I know there's dotabuff.com. If you play League of Legends, I know there's op.gg. I'm not a League of Legends player, so I'm not as familiar, but I understand it's a similar thing. You can look at your match history and read all kinds of statistics about your games, and like you can see like a timeline of like what time in the match did each player get their one item, and you can, for example, see like, oh, my opponent hit a huge power spike right here because that's when he got this item, and I didn't notice it. Right? And then I died to him. But like 2 minutes earlier, he was visible in my minimap, and I could have taken that chance to click him and see his inventory, because you can click your enemy only when they're visible and check what they have.
Sure.
But like you could have gotten that information, right? If you look at your replay and compare it to the statistics and the time, like if you learn how to like actively take these kinds of tools that a lot of games give you and turn it into information that points out to you what your mistakes were, like that's huge. Because I think a lot of time people don't quite notice what mistakes they're making. So
I was going to say, even
being able to self-analyze with these types of tools is huge. So I hugely encourage people to look for the ones that are applicable to the game.
With Final Fantasy 14, even on an easy level, before you get good at your rotation, learn to not get hit by things that give you vulnerabilities, and that's just playing the boss encounter. You'll just get to know what the boss is doing, and then you're not going to be worried so much about getting hit by stuff anymore. Then you focus on the rotation. See, it's part of the step.
Yeah, that's true. When you learn more,
and that's why Final Fantasy 14 is fair, because it teaches you that part visually.
Mm-hmm.
Anyways, I want to say one really quick thing on this whole thing that applies to all forms of practice and anybody out there getting good at literally anything. It's a great little saying. You can't do much in a day, but you can learn a lot in a year. Just don't give up and get good.
Yep.
You know, you're practicing a skill today, you're probably not going to be able to incorporate that into your stuff tomorrow. But if you practice that skill every day for a week, you're going to be miles ahead where you were a week ago, every single time.
I like that.
Yeah.
I think that's on point.
It keeps it good. You want to know why? Because getting good is a long game. It's not a short game.
That's true. There's definitely things you can do to accelerate it, but careful with them because they'll stress you out, or they might hurt you, like literally physically if your skill is physical based, right? Or they might give you problems in motor. Yeah, for the most part, if you play it like a long game, you're gonna kind of be able to survive the endurance test of that too, right?
Yep. It's also just picking away at it every day. Anyways, my topic is a little short and a little more freeform. I mean, so that means that it might not end up being that short, but I don't know how long we can talk about it. I just wrote it down. I thought it'd be fun to talk about.
Okay, yeah, let's hear it.
It is. We got Endwalker coming up. We got Final Fantasy 16 on the horizon, sort of, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's out there somewhere. I think once Endwalker's out, we might start hearing more about it because it's the same team. I don't think because it's the same business division.
They don't want to
market two games at the same time.
I completely agree. I'm very excited to hear more about this. We got Final Fantasy 7R Part 2 also on a horizon. Who knows when?
Speaking of...
Yes.
Horizons, we have Horizon Zero Dawn 2.
Not what I'm talking about.
I don't think that's where you're going. I don't think that's where you're going with
Speaking of horizons, also, we're talking about Forza. No.
All right, what is it?
What would be your perfect Final Fantasy? I'm talking battle systems. I'm talking world map. Is there a world map? I'm talking action versus, I guess this is the battle systems. I'm talking, do you want towns or do you like the sort of characters that just sort of you eavesdrop because that's actually a more natural way of moving around a city? Do you want shops? Do you want crafting? Do you want vehicles? Do you want pixel art? Do you want pre-rendered backgrounds? What would your perfect Final Fantasy be? If you could take and pick and choose pieces from all of them and or include your own thing, I'm curious, what would be your perfect Final Fantasy? I feel like everybody's got a different answer because I feel like no Final Fantasy game is anybody's perfect Final Fantasy game. But we all see that there's this sort of, platonic form of a Final Fantasy game in our minds. Everybody has their own. And that doesn't exist, but everybody sort of has an idea of what that might entail, right? So I'm curious what yours is.
Oh, dude, you're not gonna... Okay, my answer is maybe not very fun, so I'll try to engage with...
Is it just FF14?
So I'll engage with the question a little more... But the honest answer is I might already have mine, and it might just be FF14.
Ooh.
And I think a big thing that makes that actually kind of a valid answer is that I've played MMOs as long as I've played Final Fantasy as a franchise. That I desperately wanted nothing more than to play FF11 when it was on shelves every time I went to EB Games as a kid, but couldn't pay a subscription fee in my childhood. So I was just basically never able to access that game. Played all kinds of other MMOs. I remember playing or watching my friend play Final Fantasy X and sitting there on the couch fantasizing about what it would be like if it was a multiplayer game. I think that in a funny sort of way, I've wanted Final Fantasy the MMO like for decades before I got my hands on FF14, and I unfortunately hate to say it, but I might have been given exactly what I wanted.
Okay, then I'm gonna change this for you then. What would be your ideal single player?
Yeah. So this is what I was gonna sort of change my answer to, because I know the question isn't fair to ask me.
I knew that going into this.
Final Fantasy 14 is maybe my favorite game ever. So
fair enough.
It's a little unfair. What is my favorite single player Final Fantasy?
No, what would be if you could design
I meant yeah. Sorry.
Yeah, okay.
I
just
phrased it wrongly. I phrased it wrongly. What would be my ideal? Yeah. I understood the question. I just said the wrong thing. So it would be if you took 14 and then gave me NPC party members so that I could. No, I'm just kidding.
Oh my god.
Just playing with you.
Just want to play with bots, do you?
My ideal FF game should have a job system.
Okay. What kind?
That's one thing that some have
like
and some don't.
Tactics or 5 or.
I don't know if I will say that any one game in the series gets it more or less right in a different like way.
I feel like Tactics gets close because it lets you make some broken things.
Because you can, a lot of the FF games let you use. Excuse me, like a different a different job's like ability as like a sub ability or whatever, right? Like I know like 5, you can do something like that. You can like equip an ability from a different job, right?
Yep.
Yeah, and then Tactics. What exactly does Tactics do? Because I'm not 100% sure. Okay, that I thought it might be. Yeah,
it's just that you also have you can equip passive abilities and things. So, for example,
is that in Tactics Advance and Advance 2 as well?
Yeah. So if you learned some other abilities,
then I think I'm familiar.
You could sort of create this like hybrid class that has 2 jobs, a main job and a sub job, but then also had passive abilities. So you could really create some really fun combinations. You know, like putting double wield on things that shouldn't double wield, or I don't know, putting double cast or 1 MP cost on characters. You know, like that kind of stuff. Things that would really augment certain classes if you could give it to them.
I follow. Okay, so then here's what I'm starting to put together. I am vaguely aware of something that's in FF11 for its job system.
Just pick the other.
That works similarly, okay? Where it's like they tried something like this in 14 where you could like borrow a skill from another job or whatever, and it proved to make balance problems and was basically untenable. But in FF11, I understand that you pick like a main and a sub job, and you can mix the abilities out of both with, I think, some limitations on the sub job.
Sure.
And it's almost exactly the system that was in Guild Wars 1 as well. So I know I'm citing a bunch of MMOs, but I actually think that is interesting and like super viable. So in a way, it's kind of like the 5 thing or the Tactics thing,
just a little bit more.
But it sounds like the version they do in 11 is even more like of a mix of the two. And so I would like to see this in combination with like the jobs having like trees. So like if you think about something like the Zodiac Age version of license boards or like 10's like sphere grid or something, like give us something that's kind of like that, right? And then like you pick 2 jobs and you can like mix things out of both of them.
And you branch them out.
But I would also like the things to be a little bit more job unique than the ones that are, because you pick 2 jobs in 12, but I would say that in 12 the licenses all feel really generic, and so like the reason why I'm going to say not quite like 12, I think the issue with 12 in Zodiac job system is it's a symptom of the fact that the game wasn't designed that way the first time around.
Right.
So like if they designed that system the first time around, I think you'd have more things that are unique to like a white mage in the white mage grid or whatever.
Yes.
Can I see what I'm saying? Like they would all be even
100%.
more specialized.
Yep.
So yeah, so something kind of like that, but more specialized. Because like I think the two class thing was like my favorite thing about like Guild Wars 1. And if I could bring that into Final Fantasy and justify it as in Final Fantasy has done this before, that's essentially what I'm trying to do here.
Okay. What would be your dream setting?
So it should have a job system. You should be able to mix them. Dream setting. I think I kind of like. I think my favorite FF setting is probably Ivalice so far.
Yeah, it's real good.
Out of the single player type ones.
It feels very lived in.
Yeah, something with like that kind of lore and that kind of depth. But at the same time, there is sort of a really unique kind of feeling to the FF games that have like a lot of modern elements.
Yeah.
Like there's something really cool about the look and feel of something like 7, especially now that it's being presented to us in this like more remake form. Like you get to see how it's like it almost in its own way is almost like a little bit like I don't want to say cyberpunk because no, it's not like
I know what you mean though.
but it's like it's got like kind of like a steampunk with like the Mako and stuff, but also you got these like rusted out old cars that look like the earliest cars of like
they look like 50s cars.
Our world. Yeah, they look like 50s cars. Yeah, so you've got this like really wild kind of yeah, I shouldn't have said the earliest cars.
It's kind of vaguely cyberpunk. And Midgar is kind of cyberpunk, let's be honest.
Yeah, but it doesn't have, I think, a lot of the well, yeah, okay. So like I think that there's like a lot to that. And I don't know if you could you give a world with that kind of flavor, the Ivalice kind of like depth and lived in feeling? Like, can you do that? I think you can.
I think you could try. I don't think many people have been successful with that, but I think it's possible.
If it's possible, I think that might be the kind of setting I would want for my ideal FF game, yeah.
Nice.
I think I want named characters.
Yeah.
Rather than like make your own party like the one or thing or whatever.
3.
Like I think
kind of 3.
Yeah, I think I do want like the very written, very named characters that Final Fantasy has mostly given us. I'm happy with that. Combat, I don't really think I want ATB or turn based.
Really?
Yeah, no.
I kind of like that.
I think I want something that has a real time flow, but I don't think I want something that's as fully action as something like 15. Somewhere like as configurable as 12. Like give me the gambit system, but maybe with a little bit more
7R
button
in there
involvement, like 7. Yeah. So imagine if you had like 7R, but instead of just having things left to the AI unless you give the command, you can like gambit system them too.
Yeah, that would be actually super good. I actually kind of hope they do something like that.
That's what I would want
for part 2.
Yeah, that's what I would want.
That'd be brilliant. I would take not even gambits. I would take just like Tails style if thens,
Right.
That would do it for me.
Sure, yeah.
I mean, I like the gambit system because you can program some really entertaining little moves in there, but...
And if we're talking dream games, is it fair to, like, not pick one composer? Can I say, like, Dream Team?
Heck yeah, man.
Go like, if it. It's this is kind of like I'm not going to do, like, the Office Dwight Schrute thing where it's, like, even in your wildest dreams, you're only, like, the devil's assistant, right? So, yeah, I want all 3 of Yoko Shimomura and Nobu and Soken, Masayoshi Soken, all working on the OST in equal measure.
Heck yeah. That'd be good.
Writing wise, like what kind of a story, what kind of a plot?
It's kind of related to setting, but yeah.
But this, the story beats are a little different, right? I want something that maybe keeps you moving. So like
on the run.
Yeah, maybe
actually
not.
A lot of Final Fantasy games have you on the run.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So I think that's like a good thing, right? Rather than something that's like super localized. But
although Ivalice is pretty localized, man. You don't go to like all over the world in that, and it makes the world feel exceptionally large because you know that you're only in a small part of it.
Yeah, that's true. You never have like...
Yeah, you don't go across the other side of the world. You only go to like 3 main cities.
Yeah.
It's kind of cool. It's got a vibe.
Well, I think what I mean is like... I think what I'm thinking is like opening segment of like 14 or of 7, you spend so much time in like one place.
I think that works really well, though. I weirdly think Midgar's kind of when 7's at its strongest.
For 7. That's pretty agreeable, but I think that with the other things I've sort of defined, I don't know if that's appropriate.
Sure.
Maybe.
You don't have to
Maybe
pin
it's
down a
fine
story,
if
man.
it's
I'm not
pretty
asking you to write
localized.
this game. Just like
No, I know. I'm just saying, like, what kind of it should be something that has excitement and drama, and I would like something that has like strong interpersonal relationships between characters.
of course, yeah. I think that's what Final Fantasy, when it does it right, it does very well. Honestly,
Something like Nine's like learn skills from equipment system could be interesting, but I think
Oh,
that
heck
if I've
yeah.
already put in like a grid thing, it might be too much. Maybe you only learn, maybe the grid system that I'm advocating that the classes would have, maybe that is pretty like succinct. Like it's not like a huge sprawling thing. It's pretty succinct and is only like the active abilities, let's say. And then maybe like the passive stuff you learn off like weapons.
that could be cool. A little bit of a hybrid system. That's neat.
I do like the learn abilities off weapons things. FF9 does that. Another game that does that is Tales of Vesperia. I really like it in that game. So I think I would like that because it does belong to the franchise because it exists in 9. So that's okay.
And 6.
Oh yeah, I guess so. In 6, I find it less fun though.
It's because 9 has little bars that fill up.
Yeah.
Man, do I love watching bars fill up.
Yeah. Yeah. It can be a little bit annoying though too. Sometimes that can be too like management-y.
Yeah.
Like always checking on it.
There was, when I did my playthrough of 9, there was a lot of switching equipment, not because I found better equipment, but because I was trying to learn abilities. So my characters were always weirdly equipped with things.
Yeah, I understand that. All right. What are like some of the other best things? I don't think there's a whole lot I would say to take from 13. It's a good game in its own right, but systems wise, there's nothing that like super jumps out at me and
Man,
makes me think I need that in like this game.
You know what I do like about 13 though?
What?
When a battle's over, you get full health.
Depends on the level design and world design.
The reason why I like that is you could make every fight
challenging instead of
you can
like mashing A simulator because you're just trying to sustain your player through
I think it's
dungeons and dungeons. Okay.
Yeah, I think
if it's going to inform
yeah.
the battle, like the encounter design and stuff, then yeah, I'm down for it, I guess.
It's kind of like how 7 had a bunch of like Mako shards and healing stuff kind of like around levels a lot. You know, when you were running through a dungeon, even if you were running into mobs, you very rarely needed to sort of like top yourself up. You were kind of always
That's
okay.
actually like a pretty good solution to the problem too. And I did say that I would want a game that has more of a real-time tilt to it. And so if that's the case, I think that might be a better version of the system than just topping you off after every fight because it seems a little weird. Like I think that works really well for 13 in some ways because its combat system is still on another screen and like it has like the macro kind of paradigm shift stuff in it. So
yeah,
I wonder if that might kind of like suck the fun out of even having like your health as a number, etc. in like something like a action-y like hybrid of like 12 and 7 remake.
Yeah.
I want to say maybe like take the Mako shard kind of health shard type of thing, but up it a little bit more and then up the combat complexity a little bit more too. Like just some tweaking on like that system to make it more like 13 without making it just a full free top off every time.
Okay.
Because I do think that sustaining your way through a zone is like kind of a Final Fantasy staple that like
it is.
I think you can put a foot on either side of the line, and if you tune it really nicely, you can make something that gives you that benefit without having to fully just hit the button on like, just top them off every time, you know?
I agree.
Are there any other categories you want me to? Oh, you did mention something like 3D or pre-render backgrounds. I think because of the type of gameplay I've defined, it probably has to be in 3D, although I do think that the pre-render background stuff has such a vibe. Here's a thought. What if, because we'll have 3D movement stuff, what if we get to kind of play around with some aspects of that design, like fixed camera, by making almost near like perspective shift segments?
Yeah, that could be cool.
Like that's taking something from sort of outside the games, but like use that to make a part that feels like a PS1 Final Fantasy game for a little bit by fixing the camera and kind of.
I think you can do some very entertaining environmental storytelling with set scenes.
Yeah, exactly.
You know?
So I'm down to say that like you can give it a little bit of that flavor if you do that kind of thing, and I would like to see that.
Cool.
I don't know. What else? You got any other categories you want me to address? I'm starting to run out of...
Not really. I was just curious what you would put in there. And
Does that sound like a good game?
I mean, I'd play it.
Would you buy that?
Yeah. I mean, you could put Final Fantasy on a bag of garbage and I'd probably play it. No, that's not true. There's a lot of Final Fantasy games I haven't played. But yeah,
Okay.
no. Yeah.
What about you? Because surely you wouldn't have brought this topic up without some, answers of your own.
Yeah. So if I was going to go with a perfect Final Fantasy game, for me, I kind of want them to do almost like remember when Mega Man came back for like, I think it was Mega Man 9 and 10, and it was like,
oh, I see. And they sort of did the NES style, even though it was
not that old though.
Wii game?
Because I would want to go back to kind of what Final Fantasy 9 looked like, but I love the pre-rendered backgrounds, and I know that they were a way to get around technical limitations, and I really think that the vibe they brought was, once we moved to full 3D because the PlayStation 2 and the PlayStation 3 and the PlayStation 4 and the PlayStation 5, computers could do things that looked really good and fully fleshed out 3D, I think we lost a little bit of the magic that limitation had, because there are some iconic, vistas and setups and locales from all of the PlayStation 1 pre-rendered background games that I think haven't been replicated in their vibe ever. And I think it would be really interesting to go back to that in 4K, not up-resed, like really, really phenomenal art direction, Like go out of the way. Let the concept artists just let their minds go wherever they want to go. Get in there with animation, have it all going on, and have the character models themselves be very, very detailed on top of that. I think there's a way you could do pre-rendered backgrounds with a very distinct art style in today's day and age that would really sell.
That doesn't have to be making a retro graphic game, yet still capturing that feel by fixing the camera and like still pre-rendering it, but not like, because there's something about like you can do it with like I think you can capture that through art direction without having to literally revert to like old tech,
But I would like to see the 2D though, because I think Bravely Default actually does this a lot, even the new one.
Yeah.
And
I'm not saying it has to be 3D. I just mean, I think you could literally pre-render it today and do this as like if your art direction is right. Like I'm not saying it has to be. Because, I guess if I say if you pre-render it with modern tech, it sounds like I'm saying, like, the same thing as, like, a CGI trailer type of, like, pre-rendered.
Oh,
and that's not really what I mean. Like, I still think you should art direction it into something that's a little more stylized and is probably not entirely realistic.
Yep.
But, I mean, like, you can do it so that it'll, like, display with, like, a sharpness on, like, 4K and, like, all of this, like, in a modern engine and still make it, like, have that mood. Like, I feel like you would almost want to make it look like a painting.
This is what I'm getting at. So I would actually like to see a Final Fantasy game, and it doesn't have to be a mainline Final Fantasy game. I would like to see a Final Fantasy game that really goes after that kind of a vibe and really, because here's the reason. If you go really strong art direction and you make it look good blown up on TVs, 4K, HD, whatever, you could do it, I think, in a way where it could be on every system, computer, because it's not doing the full 3D thing the entire time, but the style is so striking that it's still a work of art. I think you got something there. And in terms of battles, honestly, Final Fantasy 9 just faster. Final Fantasy 9 is too slow. Just 9 but faster. Kind of.
9 but without loading. 9 but on NVMe SSD or PS5 SSD.
Here, no, I'm gonna change this.
I think you mean gameplay faster.
9's
a little bit.
9's like every character has a job. Not necessarily job system. I do like the job system, but every time I play a job system game, I break it. It's kind of a little more fun to me to kind of play like the set roles. So Final Fantasy 9 forces you into roles, which is fun. It's a little bit like 4 in that way. So I think that would be cool. But then the battle system is like 10. Actually, 10's kind of like that too. You have set rules, but you can then make everybody whatever you want. But in 9, you can't do that. Like there's no point when like the grid opens up and you can do whatever. Everybody has a role. So 9, but 10. So not ATB, but that kind of turns thing that 10 has going on. I love 10's battles. They're as fast or as slow as you want them to be, and they offer so much strategy while also feeling very Final Fantasy. And I love it. I think it's fantastic. So 10's way up there for me. I want everybody in on the music. Same like you. I'm there for it. Except also get Chrono Trigger's composer. Mitsuda?
Yeah, I think Mitsuda is his name. Did he work in Final Fantasy before?
You know what? I don't know. I know
I'll look it up while you continue. I'm not necessarily going to strictly say that they have to have worked in FF before. Maybe that's a little unreasonable because I think he's worked in Square Enix. Maybe that's good enough.
Well, I'm pulling him up here just because.
Apparently, he worked on Episode Ignis.
Oh, that makes sense. Okay.
Apparently, he did sound design, but not music on FF5. Those seem to be the two FF games he's worked on.
Well, that's what he was doing prior to Chrono Trigger was sound design. Anyways, so
I'll say he's a valid choice because he's been in the franchise.
I also just love his music. I listen to the Chrono Cross soundtrack all the time. I think that thing's brilliant.
I just think it would be weird if like somebody's answer to this question was like a lot of things have nothing to do with FF, right? Because we're still saying it's kind of like right. So like I that's why I just want to sort of check. He's close enough because he's worked at Square Enix for so long and he has touched Final Fantasy. So good enough.
I was gonna say I also just think that of anybody who hasn't done Final Fantasy proper, who could do it, I think he could do it.
He can have I could adjust mine to even include him too. That's valid. I don't have no problem with that. I think the stuff he's worked on is absolutely fantastic.
Just make every song Corridors of Zeal in different arrangements, and I'll play that game. No.
Yeah.
What else? Setting. I weirdly like Final Fantasy VIII setting, which is kind of like Final Fantasy 15 setting, which are like which is sort of like Final Fantasy 13 setting. I don't know why I like those settings. I really like the medieval stuff. I just think that medieval stuff is a fantasy thing that happens all the time, and I think it's fantastic. But what Final Fantasy does that I think is interesting is it has very Final Fantasy ways of looking at what magic would look like in a futuristic and or modern society that I don't see in other games. Every time a different game tries to make like an advanced magic civilization, it's always a little bit... What I like about Final Fantasy is it seems like our civilization just with magic, which is weird, but it works.
That's why I wanted to build 12's world building, but not keep it so like low tech.
Yeah, exactly. So that works for me.
Put words to that.
Yeah,
really well.
I would enjoy that. It would be cool also if battles were like Chrono Trigger and they happened on screen, but I know I want pre-rendered backgrounds, so that's kind of like a weird way to do that. You might have to just switch to the battle screen. I kind of want like a retro throwback Final Fantasy that has all of the quality of life of modern day Final Fantasies, basically, is what I'm looking for. But I think why I would like a return to a more restrictive overall gameplay design and a more old school RPG design is I think as these games get really, really big and really, really open, that they really run the risk, I think, of becoming a check out all the points on the map kind of game. And I think that's kind of getting away from what Final Fantasy is, and kind of like how 9 was sort of their return to form, being like, oh, we're going to recognize that we used to make games like this, and here's a really good version of a Final Fantasy game. I feel like Final Fantasy is really needing another game like that. You know, like we've done a whole bunch of stuff. All of the double-digit Final Fantasy games have been very interesting and very different from... I think there's more variation between the double-digit Final Fantasy games thus far than there was between all of the single-digit ones. But 9 felt like a nice capstone on that because it kind of was the perfect Final Fantasy at that time. It was all of the best parts of all of the games that came before it. And I feel like it would be fun to revisit that idea, but now include even the good ideas that come from the other games, right? So like I'm looking for something that feels old but plays new, kind of is I guess what I'm looking for. But I also want to see them re-embrace the turn-based battle system because I think games like Bravely Default show that turn-based battle systems. Now, say what you want about Bravely Default as a game across the board. I know some people don't like the story. They don't find parts of it interesting or it's whatever. But the battles they got going on in that game are like good. And I think that there's a place for really good turn-based combat in today's gaming scene. People just want to move away from it because it's very much seen as an antiquated thing. And I don't think that that's completely fair. You know, there's a reason people go back and play 6 and 7 all the time. You know, there's something about it. Even if that's a little bit of a weird way to interact with the game, I don't think it's an invalid way of interacting with the game. And I do like it. Like, I legitimately do like playing 10. I think 10 has great combat. So that's what I would like to see. I think
that's interesting. I think that we have a lot in common in our choices, few differences, but
I think that's why I like 10, because 10 kind of was, it didn't have a free moving camera. It had set pieces. It had set pieces, but they were all fully 3D, which was a neat look. But I think it kind of dates it a little bit, and it would be really neat. It would be really neat to see a game that basically did what 10 did, but with a really distinct art style. Yeah, just really beautiful art. Like, it would be awesome to play a game that looked like the concept art for Final Fantasy games. You know, it would be.
Yeah.
We don't have to chase the uncanny valley with a game like that. We can really just make it beautiful and make it sound beautiful and dig up all these nostalgic memories. You know, I think there's an opportunity there. I really truly do. I don't know that we're ever going to see anything like that, but you know, whatever.
Okay.
I think that's what I would make for my perfect Final Fantasy. I was just thinking about this. This is a kind of silly throwaway topic. I was just thinking about it because
I think it's a fun topic. I didn't mind talking about it. I think it was great.
We do have some stuff coming up for Final Fantasy, and there's a lot of RPGs coming out, and actually it's kind of not a lot, but it's been sort of like a lower output year for RPGs. I mean, COVID has really screwed up game development across the board.
Maybe it's been a lower output for everything.
Yeah. So I was just kind of thinking about, like, what would I want in a Final Fantasy if I could have a Final Fantasy, you know? Mm-hmm. And that's kind of where I settled. I really felt that something like that, something that embraced what I liked about 7, 8, and 9, but then also what I liked about the first 6, and then also the best parts of the quality of life improvements from all of the double-digit games. I think that's what I think is there. And then music from across the entire history of Final Fantasy.
Yeah, it's like... It kind of is what it is for music. Like,
can I add
you just
whoever...
like it, you just want it all.
I'm very sorry. I do not know their name, but whoever composed Nier, let's get them on this too.
Is it Keiichi Okabe? I probably don't pronounce it right, but I know Okabe is his last name, I think. Yeah, have him do it.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Because I was just thinking, put the prelude in.
I know how to spell it, but I don't know how to pronounce it because I'm bad at that. But, yep.
If you haven't played Paradigm's Breach out there, if you're not a Final Fantasy 14 person, you should check out the music for that because...
He counts, by the way. He has worked. He did the main theme for 15 episode Gladiolus, and he also did sound effects in Tactics War of the Lions version.
Nice.
So he counts. He's touched the franchise. He counts.
He's in. So
I'm down.
So, yeah, because the way they mixed up the Final Fantasy and the Kinase, oh man, it was real good.
So good.
It's so good. Anyways, I think I don't have much more to say on this. I just wanted to get your opinion. Let us know out there in internet land, what would you want in a Final Fantasy game? It can be anything. It's really a wish list.
He did some arrangements that are in Smash Ultimate. It doesn't say what tracks, but...
Or the Final Fantasy ones?
For Okabe?
Yeah.
What ones would he do for Final Fantasy?
Well, I mean, Cloud's in there.
Yeah, but it's not like he worked on Final Fantasy 7.
They could have hired. Anyways, I was going to say they could have hired to arrange it.
He's just the person who's around. Yeah, I don't know. I would be very interested to find out. I'm sure if I Google it more, it wouldn't be that hard to find out. But we can talk about that amongst ourselves afterward.
we can do that another time.
I guess, is it time to talk about backlog?
Oh, baby. Is it time to talk about backlogs? The answer to that, yeah, it is. It is time. Okay. We're going to do that now. So here we go to Backlog Land.
You know what it is, it's the backlog.
All right, we're back in Backlog Land. What do you got this week, Ben?
So I really feel a lot like I talked about this game before, but it's not in our past choices. I have an idea of where I might have mentioned it, so you'll have to call me out if I did indeed talk about it.
Oh, I'm ready.
I just bought, because it's on sale, 13 Sentinels Aegis Rim.
I don't think you've talked about it. Wait.
It feels like I talked about it because I have a memory of saying, I think to you, that the developer is the one who did like Odin Sphere and a couple of games like that.
It's ringing a bell, but I'm not familiar.
The one, so here's the thing. Do you remember when we podcasted with Adam's Scientific Canada thing?
Yes.
Did I say we should do backlog for that, and did I pick this for that? Because that's what I'm thinking. I might have talked about it before.
Oh, possibly. I don't remember.
Seems weird, right?
We might.
Anyway, this game was on sale for 60% off because somehow this game, which came out like at least worldwide, like over a year ago, is still sitting at $79.99 most of the time.
Okay.
So I saw it for like $32 and just jumped on it.
That seems fair.
I heard this game is incredible. I know that a couple of content creators I really like had a lot of positive things to say about this. I think in particular Klemps, who kind of like is like well known for being like a huge Nier fan, and in general I've agreed with a lot of his like taste and preference in like games, especially like narrative games. So if he feels really optimistic about this game like he did in a video that I saw him talk about it, I get the feeling that I'll really like it. My understanding is its gameplay is kind of like a little bit like visual novelty, although it's like has exploration and dialogue and stuff. It's not just like literally a character drawing on it. Like you move, I think you do move around and stuff, right? So it's not like literally visual novel, but it's like it has like a lot of this like sort of dialogue exploration stuff. And then like for some reason the battles are like real time like mecha strategy battles in like a screen that almost looks like an SMT like map where you like travel between like the districts of town. Like that's what it looks like to me at first glance. I haven't really seen it in motion, but apparently it's actually like a real time strategy battle, but not like RTS like StarCraft, AoE, whatever. It's just like it's strategy and it's real time, but it's
like Final Fantasy 12 like Revenant Wings on the DS.
Yeah, it's some kind of like mecha combat, something like that. I don't really know. Seems very interesting.
I could be on that.
Yeah, I really want to know. I really want to know like what it's like because I've just heard a lot of interesting stuff about it. So, yeah.
Nice.
That's about what I have to say about that. I really hope I'm not doubling down on it. I hope that my memory of talking about it was actually just private conversation. But if I have mentioned this before and you can find where I did, I'm sorry, and call us out on it.
It's not on the official list, so you're safe.
Yeah.
Because my pick is also something that I've definitely talked about before. But I've been watching a lot of content about this kind of thing. I can see you in the Google sheet getting ready to type it out.
Yeah, why not?
I want to go back and finally finish a real run through of Dark Souls Remastered. I bought it when I bought my PS4, and I played a lot of it. And once again, like usual, I didn't get good. I've never gotten good. I get good at games sometimes. I'm getting good at Metroid Dread, but I think it's because the checkpointing in Metroid Dread's really nice. If you die to like a big enemy, like a boss or something, you start outside the door of the room, even if your save point was a little while back. So it's very forgiving, which is great because you wander into boss encounters sometimes in that game by accident. And it's nice that you don't get, punished for exploring if you fall into one of these encounters. I think that's very good. It's a little forgiving, but I appreciate that. And I basically was watching Eurogamer do a whole run through of Bloodborne from a few years back, and I noticed that the checkpointing and like the shortcut system with the lifts and the gates and everything in Bloodborne seems pretty fair with regards to where it is on the boss room. But I remember the first Dark Souls had a couple of situations where it's a wee bit of a poke to the boss from your last bonfire, which is fine. But that always kind of put me off of that game a little bit because I would sometimes go to do a run of the boss. I'd be like, okay, let's go do I don't know. We'll say the Taurus Demon just because it's the first boss, and I've beaten that one a lot, so I can beat that one. I'm not that bad. But the point is, the bonfire for that is halfway through the Undead Burg, and you have to really run a gauntlet, to get up to him. And sometimes when I was really, really bad at it, I would be, I would try just running past everybody or going slow or whatever. And by the time I got to him, I had no Estus and I was hurt. And then the run was basically
kind of dead.
And that always put me off of that game a lot because that happened to me a lot whenever I would try to play it. I don't think I think that Dark Souls 1 is a groundbreaking, important game, but I do think that it sort of didn't have everything quite right. And I'm not saying they got it right with Dark Souls 2 or even Dark Souls 3, but they seem to really have hit the nail on the head with Bloodborne from what I've seen and what people have told me. So I'm really excited for Elden Ring because I know that in Elden Ring, they have sort of you stumbled across a boss. We actually have a checkpointing system for that now. It's not super forgiving. It's only near certain encounters in certain places. But if you're a little far from it's not a bonfire, I forget what it's called, something Grace. If you're a little far from it, there's like a statue near some boss doors, and it will let you, or near certain boss encounters and things like that, and it will let you spawn moderately close in case, because it's an open world game, in case you were wandering and like Metroid, found a tough encounter that you would love to take another stab at, but you're at the other side of the map or whatever, right? Like they made it so that it's not as punitive as it potentially could have been, which I think still is at the heart of what makes those games fun, while also being a little bit more inviting to new people. So why Dark Souls 1 always freaks me out is because I do find it a little bit, personally for me, I know it's not the hardest game, a little bit daunting because of how intense it is about some of that stuff. Example, fighting the gargoyles on top of the church to ring the first bell. Mm-hmm. You got to go up and then through that corridor of guys that all do frenzy attacks, and is it hard? No, it's not hard. It only takes a couple of minutes, but like I've also definitely died trying to get to that boss after fighting that boss and dying to that boss. And it just adds that one extra step of frustration that stopped me from having fun when I was playing that game. Sometimes. But that's why I'd like to beat it. That's why I would like to beat it, because I know that some people thrive in those situations. And I want to be one of those people because I really want to play all of these games. They are so up my alley. I love the lore. I love the look. I love the music. I love the whole thing. Like I truly, honestly do. I've bought them all. They're all on my PS4. Just sitting there. Like I have all of these games. And I haven't finished a single one of them. So I want to start with Dark Souls Remastered. I want to beat it. And I heard a tip online. If you're getting stressed out, someone said to listen to podcasts or just like other music, which I know you've said that kind of breaks the immersion. It's not as fun. The soundtrack's actually very good. It hypes up the moments. I get so stressed out that if I was passively listening to something else or even watching TV while playing these games, I bet you I would be able to finish them. Because
if you got to stress manage to get through it, that's okay. Like at the end of the day, if that's what you got to do to experience your game, that's fine. I think that it's like really a big part of like mood and like the setting, the world building stuff. Like it just really is like part of the, so to speak, like the art of the game. But like you got to do what you got to do. Like, you know what I mean?
I think
like, that's what it takes. That's what it takes.
I think that's got to be the way I tackle them. Because honestly, Metroid Dread, I'm like watching sitcoms on Netflix while I play it in bed. That's how I'm getting through it. Because, when episode's on, I'm kind of half paying attention. And then I'm also just running the boss over and over and over again. And it's like my level of frustration is a lot lower because it kind of just feels like something I'm just like, just taking a run at, as opposed to like, I need to figure this out. It actually works better when I divide my time. Anyways, point is, I've gone on for this about too long. Dark Souls Remastered. I'd like to take another swing at it because I think if I crack Dark Souls Remastered, I think I could play 2 and then 3 and Bloodborne and Sekiro, and I would have like a very good time with all of them. It needs to click, and it hasn't clicked yet. Yeah. So that's...
I think it will. It's one of these things like this is a music analogy maybe, but like one of my favorite artists is Animal Collective, and I think the first time I heard them and tried to listen to an album was about 5 years before the first time I liked it. So
fair enough.
I think that can happen with games too.
I mean, I pre-ordered Dark Souls when it came out the first time, and I didn't beat it then, so...
Yeah, I mean, it's been a little longer, let's say, but...
We'll find out.
I think it's still possible.
I've been a fan from afar for a very long time, and I love everything they do, like I said. I just personally have not been able to physically get good. And maybe I will, but not today. Today, I think we should wrap it up. We've gone on for a long time. Thank you so much for listening. Let us know what you think out there in internet land. Ben, it's that time of the show again for you to do socials.
Sure. So we're on YouTube as This Podcast Cannot Continue with all of the spaces and good stuff like that. We are on Twitch as This Podcast Cannot Continue without any spaces because that's how usernames work there. On Twitter, we're TPCC_podcast. You can find us under the title This Podcast Cannot Continue on any of your favorite streaming services like Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Amazon Audible, or really any streaming service that has podcasts. We're probably on all of them, or at least most of them. And that's it, right? It always feels like I haven't said enough.
Well, maybe we need to add more, but that can be a discussion for another day. We're signing off once again. Thanks for listening. But for now, this podcast cannot continue.